Elliott Abrams, welcome to Bloomberg, sir. Special representative for Iran and Venezuela. So I suppose what we all really want to know is your three-stop trip. Are you readying for more sanctions against Iran?
We have a multi-year sanctions program on Iran. There's a pretty regular flow of sanctions. There have been sanctions in the last few days. There will be more. There's no particular speed up of the flow, but it continues.
What would you say to the people that say, look, there's very little left for you to sanction? What exactly are you going to target?
Well, we never announce sanctions in advance. I have heard for years now that the Americans are out of sanctions. There's nothing left to sanction, which really is quite false. I would say that one of the things that we have on the agenda now is the human rights questions, because we are coming up to the very sad anniversary of the events of last November, including the Mashar massacre. But in terms of economic sanctions, there are many pieces of the Iranian economy that connect to the Revolutionary Guards, that help fund the Revolutionary Guards, that are obviously candidates for sanctions because, unfortunately, the Rev Guards now permeate the entire Iranian economy.
Given the tour that you've just had, do you have complete support from Saudi, the UAE and Israel to raise new sanctions?
Well, I don't want to speak for those governments. Generally, I would say that they support American policy with respect to Iran because we do share a sense of the threat that emanates from Iran's nuclear program, its missile program, and its conduct throughout the region.
In these last 70 days of the Trump administration, what we want to get a sense of in our region is America trying to build a coalition for a military strike if necessary?
You know, I've heard that. I mean, but I hear it from exactly the same sources that were confident that there would be a Trump military strike in October prior to the election. So I would urge you to disregard the people who have fervid conspiracy theories.
So a military strike is off the table. A military strike is not your ambition.
Military strikes are never our ambition, but they are never off the table in protecting the United States. I just think that all of this is connected somehow to bizarre theories, mostly connected to the American election, and those theories have already been proved wrong. The United States has very capable military forces in the Middle East. We will use them to defend Americans in the region. But the notion that we have an intent and desire to engage in aggressive activities is garbage.
You mentioned the election, so let's go there. We've got lawsuits pending in Michigan and Pennsylvania. The legal process will work its way through. But if the Supreme Court handed down a ruling that there was no widespread election fraud, no irregularities, would President Trump concede then?
You know, I'm a State Department official. I'm here on a diplomatic trip, and this gives me the excellent excuse to duck your question, and I will use it.
Are you okay? But you are the U.S. Special Representative on Iran. What preparations are you making to hand over to the Biden team?
I would only say to you that U.S. policy toward Iran reflects the fundamental interests of the United States, and those interests really don't change over time, unfortunately, because Iran's conduct has not changed. We've seen really decades of aggressive behavior in the region and terribly brutal repression inside the country. Our policy is based on American interests in the region and on the protection of our friends and allies in the region. That's true regardless of who's president.
Well, if we look at the past 4 years, Mr. Abrams, Tehran, maximum pressure from the United States of America, the policy, maximum pressure. It has not brought Tehran back to the table, nor has it brought regime change. Has maximum pressure policy failed?
No. First of all, it's not a regime change policy. What was the idea? Cumulative pressure on Iran to force it to change its behavior. Again, on the nuclear file missiles and its aggressive behavior in the region. We believe we've built up an enormous amount of leverage because of the impact on the Iranian economy. We believe that this leverage should now be used to force Iran to negotiate, and I think there'll be a negotiation, no matter who's president of the United States in 2021, to force it to negotiate changes in its conduct. The maximum pressure campaign is cumulative. When it begins, obviously after week one or year one, it is not nearly as forceful as it is now. And now we should use that leverage to change Iran's behavior.
Are you optimistic that a deal can be struck with whoever's in the White House in 2021?
I am optimistic if the leverage is used. If it's discarded, then why would the Iranians agree?
Now, the Iranians broke silence over the past couple of days in terms of the number of barrels of oil that they've managed to ship during this period of maximum pressure. They say 600,000 to 700,000. What is your estimate?
I think that's probably not an unreasonable estimate. It changes clearly from month to month as we enforce the sanctions and they try to go around them. I think it's very clear, though, that there has been a massive decrease in the amount of oil that they are able to export, first. Second, not only is demand for oil low because of the general problems in the world economy, but they're forced to give discounts because of the sanctions campaign, so that also reduces the revenue they're getting. And their economy is clearly in a significant amount of trouble. You see it in the value of the rial.
May I pivot to Saudi Arabia? You've just returned from Saudi. Have you had discussions, or how advanced are the discussions about bringing Saudi Arabia into the Abrams agreement? Are we close to that?
Again, I don't really want to speak to the four of the countries that are involved in that. I think we're probably, in my estimation, going to see a pause in the number of countries until January 20th. And I think we'll see more in 2021 because it reflects the fundamentals of the region, mainly that all of the countries around Iran regard it as a threat and a danger, and therefore they have a common interest.
You are the closest thing to access to the Saudi regime that we will speak to in the next week or so. Is there an appetite from the conversations that you've had to join the coalition of the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel?
I think there is an appetite in Saudi Arabia for more collaboration with all of the countries of the region that are facing this Iranian threat. The question is, how does that manifest itself? In which agreements? How many public? How many not so public? And I think we'll see that transpire over the course of 2021.
In terms of the next couple of months, the world is watching. At what juncture do you believe Mr. Trump will step down? Again,
I'm not here to discuss American politics, American internal situation, and I'm not going to do it. I'm here to discuss American foreign policy.
Well, let's talk about the foreign policy finally. The allies in the region, some have warned that a revival of the 2015 Iran Accord, that you say you're reasonably optimistic there will be some kind of a deal next year, could destabilize the region and ultimately lead to conflict. Is that a real risk, sir?
I think there is a real risk that if the leverage we have on Iran is discarded rather than being used, if Iran is able to continue its conduct in this region, continue its missile program, I think there is every reason for its neighbors to fear more of the same, more subversive activity, more aggressive behavior. We see it throughout the region. The only thing that will restrain it, the only thing that will prevent Iran from continuing is pressure. They don't want to change their conduct. Why would they? The answer is they will only under concerted pressure.
To close, sir, you've made it very clear that the number one priority is not a military strike, but do you have the support of Saudi, the UAE and Israel to do so if it comes to that in these dying days of the administration?
I think the United States is well prepared to defend ourselves and our allies. We have very capable forces in this region and would be able to respond to any activity that Iran undertakes against our allies, against our partners, or against the American presence in the region. That would be a defensive reaction, and the question really is whether the Ayatollahs will decide to try to attack American interests in the region. The question is really one that should be put to Tehran.
To close, sir, you're in touch with the president, we know. Is he in defiant mood? Is he there? Have you spoken to him in the past couple of days? What's his mood at the moment? We haven't heard too much from him publicly. What sort of mood? How would you describe the president's mood?
I have not been in touch with the president since the election. And again, I'm, pardon me, concentrating on American foreign policy. That's the purpose of the mission here, to talk to friends and allies about the problems we face in common.